Hello friends, this is Brent Harris and I'm a productivity coach. Today we're going to talk about the flow state and specifically how to get into the flow state with any activity. So it could be anything related to work, could be related to a household chore, it could be relating to a different person. Whatever it is, if it's something you're doing, then it should be possible to get into the flow state with it. And so that's what we're going to get into in this video. The flow state is one of my favorite topics to talk about because it's very central to our conversation about productivity, which is central to our conversation about growth and evolution and actualizing our potential in the world. The problem, or I guess the interesting quality about the flow state, is that at the entry level, it's something that you can do science about and you can talk about and learn about and study. For example, the concept of flow itself, it was coined by the scientist, the psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he wrote all about his findings in his book that was called Flow. But the more that I go into it, the more that I study it and dive into it and then come back out and figure out how to articulate and explain it, the more mystical it becomes, the more paradoxical it becomes. And we're going to explore some of these paradoxes today. And it's through becoming comfortable with these paradoxes and learning to work with them and use them and wield them to your own advantage. That's how you can actually get into the deeper territory of flow, and how it doesn't have to be just a localized event when you're doing the dishes. Say, flow can be a state that you actually live from. So it's very interesting stuff. So I have a few things that I want to get into. So broadly speaking, just before we get into it, I'll give you the bullet points for the order that we'll go at this in. So one is I want to refresh us on a little bit more detail on the importance of flow. When that's done, I'm going to actually get a little bit deeper into the flow concept. What is it? Like, what actually is it? We'll talk about that. The mentality of flow. So what's the headspace of flow? That will be next. And then we're going to get a little bit more practical. We're going to actually enter into the flow state. Hopefully you can actually have an experience of it as I talk about it, as we go through it. And then the mystical element that I was referencing earlier, then we'll finally be ready to talk about that, and I'll take you through that as well. All in all, we're set up really nicely here. This is going to be a great time. I think this will be a very valuable talk. And if you feel in general like there are aspects of your life, of your work life, if there are tasks that you run into, if there's stuff that you're procrastinating, if there's stuff that you just have the hardest time getting yourself to do, so either you avoid doing it altogether, you are able to successfully talk yourself out of doing it, or you do it, but only if you just like drink 5 coffees and just force yourself to do it, then this video will be for you. This is to you that I'm talking to. We want to make it so that there's no friction or resistance to overcome in order to do this thing. Friction being the opposite of flow. So, the importance of flow. So to begin with, there is no productivity without it. There is no productivity. There's no real substantial productivity without flow. And the reason being is that if you're not in flow, then what that means by definition is you're using your willpower. You are running on your own personal reserves of energy and willpower and effort, and there's like a forcing element to make things happen, and you're exhausting and tiring yourself out. And so there's no real productivity that comes without flow. Flow, the importance of flow is that it is a way to find and create takeoff momentum. So to use a different example, say you want to set a habit, say you want to set like an exercise habit and you've been unsuccessful in doing it, and maybe you've had like a few days in a row where you are working out, you go to the gym, and then after 2 weeks or 3 weeks you stop and you fall off the wagon, and you look at your history and it's just this on again, off again kind of thing with no takeoff momentum. Then flow would be the answer to that. Flow is what you use to actually have takeoff momentum. It is the meeting of the left and the right brain. So it is a meeting point of, on the right brain, you have creative, feminine, present moment awareness, enjoyment, the delight and the response of the inner child. And the left brain is the inner adult, the one that looks at time, that projects into the future, that likes to put the puzzles together, that likes things to be in order and make sense. And so in the flow state, there's this very important and exquisite meeting of present moment awareness as well as moving into the future from a left brain perspective. It is the most creative state, period. It is the most creative state, period. When you're in flow, another paradoxical quality about it, I'm glad that we can just start diving into the paradoxes, because there's so many, and I really want to, see them start flowing out. So when you are in the flow state, there's less of a heavy emphasis on the use of your mind. So if you're not in flow, then you are using old prescribed techniques, old methods, old ideas. There's like kind of like a taking of the old and maybe dusting it off and presenting it as if it's new, but it's not actually new. It's still a churning out of the same old stuff. Whereas in the flow state, there are these apertures in your mind. Your mind is actually moving less aggressively, less assertively, with less velocity, and there are gaps between certain thoughts where new wisdom can come in from between. Where there's gaps where new stuff can come in from between, and that's the new stuff. This is the new material. This is the new content that allows you to do things in a new way. And it has this sort of sparkling, shining effect about it, which is nice. And finally, the importance of flow is it is the way that we can express our authenticity. So if you are in flow, say, and let's say you're playing the piano, you're sitting at the piano and you're playing it. Generally, we'll play songs that we played before, we'll play what we know how to play, but then every once in a while we'll hit this kind of zone where we start to become a little unhinged, we start to detach a little bit from the old ways, and we start to kind of get out of the way mentally, and then new stuff starts to flow through. Well, it's not just any random stuff, it's actually our own personal style that's starting to come through. And that's nice as well. You're starting, as you go into flow and as you channel new creativity through, if you're playing piano, if you're drawing, if you're in a conversation, if you're dancing, if you're just, even if you're doing something like washing the dishes, it's your own unique essence that you're bringing through. So it's new layers of authenticity that are surfacing from inside of you. So the flow state is it's a very important and practical way to discover your own authenticity in the world, your own personal style. If you're wondering, for example, what is your unique voice in the world, or your own unique gift in the world, or your own unique contribution to the world in some way, then it's through the flow state that you'll be able to discover it and enhance it and augment it and sort of articulate it. There we go. Articulate it and kind of clarify it a little bit more and present it more to the world. So hopefully by now, you can see what an important and powerful concept and state the flow state is, and how much benefit there is to be had from it. This is really something that you can move all of your chips in when you're talking about productivity. All the other stuff, say the stuff about like, force and like kind of like that Spartan quality of like, or the sort of Napoleon Hill, or this sort of old school self-help where you like really just kind of make yourself do it and you kind of power it through, and there's this like big masculine element that does have a place to play in the broader conversation of productivity. But for the time being, let this be the one that you explore. Let this be the one that you really focus on and augment in your life and really add it to your personal arsenal. So, one way of visualizing, I'm going to offer 3 metaphors just to start with as a way of visualizing the flow concept. So the first is the concept of the unicycle. So say if you are riding a unicycle, which most of us have never done before, but you can maybe imagine what it's like. It's like you're kind of balanced precariously on top of a wheel, and you have 2 pedals and nothing really to hang on to. And imagine if you are, for whatever reason, you are long distance unicycling, so you want to get several kilometers or miles into the distance. And let's just say that you want to get there as quickly as you can. From a certain old school logic, you would think that pedaling as quickly as you possibly can and almost leaning forward and really adopting as much urgency and rush as you can in your pedaling, that would get you there faster. There's an inclination in all of us. If we want to get somewhere really fast, we move forward, we lean forward, we tilt forward, we move off center in order to get there as quickly as we can. And yet, if you were to do that on a unicycle, you would fall over. And so therefore, the most expeditious way to get to where you're going is to remain balanced and on top of the unicycle, on top of the wheel, and at center. A different metaphor is that of the captain. So imagine you are a captain over a crew of a ship, and let's say it's one of these massive wooden ships, and let's say it's the 1400s and you're crossing the Atlantic. Where does the captain reside? So the captain, as well as the crew, want to get to the promised land as quickly as they can, and so there would be this innocent temptation to kind of get to the very front of the boat and sort of lean forward and try to imagine getting there, try to will yourself to get there as quickly as possible. But really, the captain's spot is in the helm. And actually, really, this leads us into our third metaphor, which is that of the monarch. So the king or the queen, that person, and so we'll wrap that up and call that the sovereign monarch. That person, their place is in the throne or in the cockpit or in the helm, which is to say to be at the very center or at the very kind of most highest functional spot in the area, in the boat, in the castle, in the kingdom. You want to be in the very center. And the reason being is that when you're in the center, you can let people come to you. You can let your subjects or the peasants or the servants or the captain crew, they can come to you. You can issue orders. You can send them away. This is where the leader resides, within that body. And if the captain is off the center, if they're not in the helm or in the throne, then they can't, where are they? They can't necessarily be found. And it's really, it makes it difficult for them to do their job. So there's this enormous theme as we go forward. And for those of you who have, if you're familiar with the concept of flow, all of this will sound familiar. What's emerging for me lately as a really even more deeper core theme is this concept of being at center in order to move most expeditiously. I was working once with somebody from the military, and she said this really in an offhand way, like she didn't, almost as if she didn't realize like the incredible gravity and paradoxical importance of what she just said. But once she said it, it never left my mind ever again. It became one of the most important things I've ever heard and one of the most important things I ever say. And it's this: slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Now, if you hear this too, perhaps you've heard this before, and there's this temptation to hear it and go, oh, like that sounds so simple. Like, okay, I got it, put it over here, I got it. But this phrase, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, therefore slow is fast, is a paradox that you just can't quite resolve, and instead it just unfolds and just opens up more and more wisdom every time you return to it. This is my experience with it anyway. So, therefore, I guess another element of the importance of flow, which should go right up at the top, is if it's your desire to get where you're going, to complete what you're doing, to get into the future as quickly as you can, to find the most expeditious route, then it's done via flow, which is to say it's done by slowing down. It's through slowing down we go quicker. How could that possibly be? It's such a crazy, crazy paradox to consider. A different way would be to imagine, say you're in a maze. Say you're like looking for the cheese in the maze, and it's a big, long maze, and you're going as fast as you can and running, running, running. Well, if you stop, then maybe you'll realize you can actually climb the wall of the maze, and you can go one tier meta and actually go much more directly to the thing. That's another concept about flow. It's just, it reveals to you the most direct way to where you're going. So that's the unicycle, the captain, and the king. So another crop of metaphors to illustrate this is the farmer, the parent, and the investor. All three of these, the farmer, the parent, and the investor, these are people who cannot expedite the fruition of what they're doing, whether they're raising a child, raising corn, or allowing an investment to come to maturation. These are things where Where our intelligence and our creativity implies is setting up conditions, setting up a space or a container for results, for fruit to come through. And as soon as you set up that space, you get the hell out of there, maintain it in a watchful way, especially as a parent. You maintain and watch, and you keep bad things from happening to your investment, to your crops, to your child. You make sure that it's nourished. You make sure that it's maintained, in other words. But there's nothing that you can do to make something grow, to make a child grow up, or to make an investment come to maturity any quicker. And so there's this enormous quality of surrender when we're doing this, when we're in the flow state. There's a surrender against time. We surrender to the truth that none of this can be sped up, despite the fact that being in flow is the quickest way to do it. So that's the concept of flow. It is a setting up of space. It is an allowance of time. And we're going to get into some things that you can affirm, some things you can say and journal to kind of really step into that mentality. But I would love for you, as we do this, I would love for you to just get set up for the knowing that you are surrendering against time and you're surrendering against control, because your control only goes so far when you're growing corn. You can control the space, but you can't control the growth of the actual thing. So there's deep surrender there as well. And then in that surrender, there's also a huge quality of trust. Trust that everything is on track. Trust that what you're doing is working. Trust your intuition. There's a huge element of trust if it is your desire to enter deeply into the flow state. See how deep this shit goes? So the mentality of flow. So what I want to do now is I want you to imagine an activity that you do not easily find the flow state in with. So just like you can take, honestly, almost anything. Any task you have to do at work, any chore you have to do at home, any sort of creative project that you have either started or have delayed starting, or you started and you stopped and you just get really caught up in your mind. You want to do more of it. You want to make it, but you just get caught up doing it. It could be relating to people, a person. It could be something that you have a sticking point with, like cooking or some sort of simple kind of basic task, or cleaning yourself, whatever it is. So call that up to mind. So again, I'm going to sort of tell you about what we do, and then we're actually going to do it. So what we do then, and just imagine what it would be like with this, we drop the refusal to do it. So let's say, for example, it is washing dishes. So you just let the dishes pile up in your sink all the time, and you only do it at the very last minute. Recognize that on some level you refuse to wash the dishes. And this is true. You refuse to watch it until there's just the sense of like, I absolutely must. I can't get away with not doing it anymore. But even as you do it, you don't get into flow with it, because you still carry that kernel of refusal in your mind and in your heart, such that as you're doing it, you're kind of against it as you're doing it. You're trying to get it over with as quickly as you can. You're trying to project into the future. It's like, I hate this. I hate this. It's so boring. You're trying to get away from it. So that's refusal as you're doing this thing. You will also be dropping rejection, which is similar, but rejection in the sense that you feel like you shouldn't have to do this task. It's beneath you. What mental labels do you have about it? Do you find it to be stupid or annoying or nonsense or not worth your time? It's a waste of time. What we're also going to be doing is dropping our sense of rush and impatience. I've been talking about that. And a positive element about getting into the flow state. And here we have another paradox. So we just covered a list of things that you are dropping out of your mind. But here is a mentality or an attitude that you adopt towards what you're doing. And it's this. If it were not this thing, then it would be the next thing. So what we think, say if we're at work, is if I could only just get through this, then I'd be free, then I could be done, then I could do the good stuff. But what we're not taking into account is that the entirety of our lived experience on a moment-by-moment basis, an hour-by-hour basis, a minute-by-minute basis of our waking lives, our direct, grounded, right here, right now experience is always engaging with however life is presenting itself to us now. So say you're watching this video and I'm delivering this video. As you're watching this video, you might be thinking, okay, how long is this? How long is this video? I don't know either. How long is this video? Maybe you're on the fence about whether you want to finish it, whether you want to complete it. Maybe you might pause it and go away and return to it later. And so there's a real sense of I wonder what the next thing is. I wonder what I'm going to do after this. And there's a sense of projecting over onto the next thing. And the same with if you're washing dishes, it's like, okay, I really want to wash dishes so I can get on to the next thing. But the thing is that no matter what happens, as soon as we complete something, whatever's next, that next thing becomes this thing. And so therefore, there's only ever this thing. And your moment-by-moment experience will never ever be of the future. You will never ever arrive anywhere of any true significance. There's no other moment than this one. There's nowhere to go besides here and now. There's nothing besides this very experience and the different elements that flow in and out and the different ways to respond and embrace this moment, the different ways to engage with this moment. Right now, the way to engage with this moment is by sitting and taking in this information. And then when that's done, there will be a new way to engage with this moment. But there's no such thing as the future, and there's no getting out of this moment. There's only ever this moment. So that's the deep truth of if it were not this thing, then it would be the next thing. And so therefore, an act of wisdom is to get into flow with whatever this is. Because if you set yourself up for flow right now, then you will already be predisposed to the flow state for the next thing. So good. So now let's talk about how to actually enter flow. So the first thing that you'd want to do is you want to enter into this mentality of a fresh start. So if you are, let's just say right now you're sitting here and you're thinking about doing something else, and let's say you feel like there's so much for you to do and you're behind on a whole bunch of tasks and there's all this chaos in your life and you've been really letting things drag and there's a buildup of dishes and you have to clean your thing and you have all this other stuff that's, kind of on the back burner, and it feels like there's all this stuff, going on for you. The way this occurs to me, the way I like to think about this is, I used to play a lot of Warcraft. And I play Warcraft with my friends. And I remember one time where I was at a friend's house and playing Warcraft, and my friend had an older brother who was really good at it. And we were playing online against an opponent. And then when my friend would be playing Warcraft and not doing a really good job and starting to lose, he'd call his older brother to sit in and sit down, and then he would pick up the reins and win. And so from the opponent's perspective, all he ever saw was just like this player, my friend, just suddenly getting really good all of a sudden. But from our perspective, the big brother would sit down and he would dispassionately take stock. There wouldn't be any judgment. It would be a waste of time and a waste of resources. What would be the point of going, oh, this is so bad, this is terrible, you're so behind on these things, here's all the mistakes you made? That would just be a waste of resources. There's no time to devote to judgment and this kind of thing, making up a story of behindness. Instead, the brother would assess the situation from a fresh start and say, okay, where am I? What do I have? What's the setup? How are the bases in the unit set up? And then what's the plan from here? And so there's a dispassionate, completely indifferent, judgment-free moving forward from this starting point. And so you can do the same. You can do the same with just the dishes. So noticing where there's any sort of oh my God, like I can't, like there's judgment and criticism and like, you know, all this like negativity, you can just see all of that and just go, okay, thank you, and put it over here, and then replace it with, okay, fresh start. You can say the words, fresh start, let's go from here. So entering the flow, notice where there's impatience, notice where there is a desire to speed up, and be very, very vigilant. Notice where you're leaning forward on the unicycle. And then as you do that, whenever you notice it, it's that noticing that wakes you up out of that kind of hypnosis of urgency and impatience and behindness. So that's a lot of the work done. And just simply say to yourself, oh, there I go again. There I go rushing. There I go with my urgency. Okay. And then just return to center. How do you return to center? Just create an intention and say it either inwardly or outwardly. I intend now to return to center. Return to center now. Try it just to get a sense of it. Try it right now. Return to center now. Return to center now. Return to center now. Fresh start now. Right? It kind of feels a little bit like a relief. It kind of feels like, okay, like we wiped away a whole bunch of past that we've been carrying around with us, and it feels a little bit clean. Also, something very important about flow is be very vigilant about any sort of cultural expectation to exert yourself, to push, and to exhaust yourself, to move into exhaustion. In our culture, our Western culture, our basic, and this is a huge tenet of spiral dynamics, stage orange mentality, there's an emphasis on exertion and exhaustion and leaving it all on the court. And there's a sense that if you are well rested and well slept, and if you have all of your energy, then what it means is that you're not pushing yourself enough. It means that you're withholding from the mission. And I really want to invite you into a new mentality that exertion and pushing and effort no longer actually move you substantially forward. They don't move the needle forward. Instead, they show that you're not actually connected to the flow state. And so it's much better to drop this need to exert yourself and focus on finding flow. Now, here's something that you can say out loud that will help kind of ground you right into the flow state pretty much immediately. And I would invite you to repeat after me so you can really get a sense of what it feels like to say it. I allow this to take time. I allow this to take time. And one more time. I allow this to take time. Here's another one. I allow time to pass. I allow time to pass. I allow time to pass. By dropping our combative relationship with time and our unwillingness to allow time to pass, we can get into flow. You might hear some music in the background. It's because my parents are looking after my baby right now, and so it's music time. As you're doing this one particular task, what you can also say to yourself is, I'm willing to do this for as long as it takes, A, and B, I'm willing to do this as if this were the only thing I'll do from now on. The second one is significantly more hardcore. I'm willing to do this as if this was the only thing I'm going to do from now on. But if you're willing to play with it and speak it and kind of really practice vibrating that way, this is the only thing I'm doing forever, and really include this kind of forever element, what it'll do is burn out of your mentality any urgency or impatience to be somewhere else, to do something else. And then through that, it will release your conflict with that task. And in releasing your conflict with that task, it will allow you to find acceptance and centeredness as you do it, and then in that acceptance and centeredness, from there you'll be able to discover enjoyment. And then from enjoyment, you'll be able to... I'm running out of room right now, so I'm going to get on to the next thing. But to just quickly summarize the last one, in order to enter into flow with any one thing, don't project through. Allow this to take time. Allow it to take as much time as you need. Do that by affirming, I allow this to take time. I allow time to pass. I am willing to do this for as long as it takes. I'm willing to do this even if this were the only thing I do ever again. All of these things will have a way, an increasing level of intensity of burning out any ego resistance you have around the thing, and that will allow you to move from reluctance, resistance, to acceptance, to even some level of enthusiasm. So good. So the final piece now is to talk about the mystical element of it. And this is, to me, this is the extension of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's work. This, to me, is the next logical step or conclusion to the study of the flow state, which is as you get into flow with one thing, and as you practice being in flow with different things, and then as you make the flow state something you live from and a state that you no longer get out of anymore, then there's also a sense of, there's such a giving up of control around any one of the things, whether you're growing crops, you're investing, raising a child, whether you're crossing the Atlantic, all of these things that you can create the conditions for and maintain but can't force into fruition. It also becomes apparent that this is the same with your life and with your life's purpose. See, the problem that I ran into is I was so obsessed with the actualization of my potential, and same with many people that I talk to, especially in the sort of the self-help space. But the more that I study it, the more I realize that this is something that all I can do is create the conditions for and make room for and surrender to. And also the part where if I have a belief about what the actualization of our potential looks like, or if I have a belief about what mine looks like, how it actually turns out may not be commensurate with what I think it is. So can I surrender all the way by following my flow, following my intuition, and allowing everything else to fall into place? This is a deep level of surrender. It's a deep level of trust. But as I move personally deeper into these deeper realms of trust, it makes the whole texture of my moment-by-moment experience much, much richer. And it also, very importantly, removes this element of waiting for something to happen. Where so many of us feel like we're waiting for that thing to happen. That waiting effect goes away and it's replaced with a sense of now. It's happening now. So you may want to open up. I'd like to challenge you to open up to the possibility that you are being carried by a greater force. When you are planting crops, you're tapping into a greater, evolved, physical, organic process that's way beyond your ability to comprehend, even if you know little bits about photosynthesis or whatever. And the same applies to you in your life. There's a sense of being carried by an inborn, ingrained intelligence that's just beyond any of us that we can even fathom. Very importantly also, that as we do this, as we become actualized, as we develop flow, and as we achieve great things through the flow state, it stops feeling like triumph. It stops feeling like glory. What I notice is that whenever I watch any of the greats, who have become, really amazing historical creators, these are people who are generally very modest and often don't really understand where a lot of their genius came from, and don't even actually take a whole lot of credit for it, so much as they see themselves as the channel of that genius. These are not people, like if you think about, say, the Einsteins, the Da Vincis, the Michelangelos, like Shakespeare, like these people who went on to create a lot of great work in their lives. These are not people that pushed themselves really hard. More, they gave themselves up to their artistic calling. And then very, very finally, the last piece is that the distinction between you and this flow state, you and the cosmos, it starts to fall away as well. I've been exploring this concept as I've been going through the Tao Te Ching in my TikTok series. I go through a verse every video, and I'm currently on verse 23. And all these verses seem to point to the same dropping of the distinction between you and it, you and the Tao, you and God, you and the universe. And so ultimately, the flow is not something you even do. You don't actually get into the flow state. You allow the flow state to claim you. That is the video. Thank you for watching. You can get a $5 coaching session from me if you desire. There's a link for that below. You can join my email list. I suggest you do that because you will be automatically enrolled for my Sustainable High-Level Productivity course that is free. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.